Hey. All right. Where
Help me with the page.
page is going to be 543.
Thank you.
How about the paper? What were you asking about?
Paper.
That's not it. No, you think I should know by heart, right? My disclaimer. Welcome to Garden of the Spirit class studying apples from the orchard, based on for the second time beginning after Pesach 2014. This class meets in Long Meadow, Massachusetts, the center of the universe, and is held in memory of Malka Ruth Bas Moshe Margaret Vogel of blessed memory. Apples from the Orchard contains selections of teachings of Kabbalah from the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, based on the weekly Torah portion, superbly translated and explained by Rabbi Moshe Wisniewski. Okay, I did it. Okay. So the ashes, one, again, page 543, Tzav, chapter 1. The ashes of the altar and the Beis HaMikdash were cleaned every day. A Kohen wearing linen garments would remove the ashes and place them on the floor next to the altar. Ashes from the wood pile on the altar were removed to a place outside the walls of Jerusalem. One moment. Okay. The Torah says, that he should wear a linen garment when he does this. So we're going to connect the linen and the ashes too. Oh, okay. All right. Please, page 543, Gershon. You may begin. Gershon.
Yes, yeah.
No. Telling Gershon on page 543.
Oh, there he is.
And Alan, you can begin.
Esav's hair and the priest's garment. Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, command Aaron and his sons, saying, this is the law of the burnt offering. The burnt offering itself shall remain where it is burned upon the altar all night until morning, while the fire on the altar is kept going on it. The priest shall put on his linen garment and shall put his linen breeches on his flesh, and he shall collect the ashes to which the fire has reduced the burnt offering on the altar and place them beside the altar. He shall then take off his garments and put on other garments and carry the ashes outside the camp to a clean place. In this passage, the Torah describes the commandment known as lifting up the ashes. This was one of the first things done in the daily temple service after the fire on the altar had been burning the sacrifices all night. In this ritual, the priest, the Kohen, would collect a certain amount of the ashes on the top of the altar and place them on the ground next to the altar. These ashes would be absorbed into the ground on the spot. This was done every morning. In addition, whenever the ashes on the central wood pile of the altar accumulated such that there was no more room on it to burn the sacrifices, the priest would collect these ashes and take them outside the camp, or when the temple was built in Yerushalayim, outside the city walls, and deposit them there. When he did this, the priest had to wear his regular linen garment. The Arizal discusses the significance of this. I don't know. Yes.
All right. In general, the Kohen corresponds to Chesed and the Levi to Gevura. Guys should keep that in mind for any time you come across a Kohen or a Levi in discussed in Kabbalah. Chesed is an outpouring of divinity, which is a downward motion. Gevura is expressed through discipline and self-control, and upward motion. It's like you're working with what's at the bottom in order to elevate it. The Kohen, through the sacrifices, elicits Hashem's kindness. So that's the Kohen is chesed and working from the top down. The Levi sings during the sacrifices, which seeks to inspire people. And there's a yearning to rise. Thank you. Chesed is associated with the color white or the material silver, element silver. Sorry, Dr. G. While Gvura is associated with the color red or gold. This is also connected with the number 400, as in the 400 silver. The silver, chesed, and silver chesed is connected with the number 400, like it says that Avram paid Ephron 400 silver shekel for the cave of Machpelah. I do want to say that I'm not sure if it's connected here. I'm not sure if it's going to hit it. But the word for silver is kesef. Kesef also means to yearn or to long for something. Okay?
Personifies the attributes of silver, the whiteness of chesed. Temple service was divided between two classes of the tribe of Levi. The Kohanim, who were those members of the tribe of Levi who descended directly from Aaron, and the Levites, who were all other members of the tribe. The priest officiated at the offering of the sacrifices, while the Levites fulfilled other functions pertinent to the maintenance of the temple. The Levites also formed a choir and an orchestra that accompanied the offering of certain sacrifices. Spiritually, a sacrifice consists of both an upward and downward spiritual movement. The animal ascended in flames on the altar, signifying and effecting the elevation of man's animal nature into holiness. This elicited a downward flow of divine beneficence in response. The priest represented the downward response of the offering. As a result of the rituals they performed, slaughtering and burning the animal, divine fire descended from heaven onto the altar to consume the sacrifice. The Levites, in contrast, represented the upward soaring of man's heart, as expressed in the consumption of the sacrifice in the flames, in their music and song. These two movements reflect the natures of the first and principal two spheres of the emotions: chesed, loving kindness, and gevura, strength, power. The downward flow of Hashem's beneficence in the world expresses his chesed, while the ecstatic upward soaring of the soul expresses the ardent power, gevura, of human love and yearning for Hashem, expressed in the song accompanying the sacrifice. In terms of color imagery, the sweet downward flow of chesed is reflected in the pure transparency of water, or the purity of colors white or silver, while the fiery flames of gevura are reflected in the brilliance of red or gold. Accordingly, the two metals, silver and gold, are associated with the sephiros of chesed and gevura, respectively.
Okay. Number 3, the levels in the process of creation, or Seder Hishtalshelus, have sources above creation. So the different levels within the process of creation, as Asilas B'Yisir, they have sources that are beyond and before creation. As a rule, the lower a level in the process of creation, the higher its source above creation. And the example that they always give is a wall built of rocks. If the wall were to collapse and fall, the rocks that are highest fall furthest. The rocks that are close to the ground don't fall really far. The higher they are, the lower they fall. The source of chesed is in the whiteness of the head of Arachampin. So if you guys remember, we have the process of creation, Seder Shalshalos. The highest stage is called Atzilus. Before the process of creation is Keser. Keser has two parts. The higher part is called Atik Yomin. The lower part is called Arachampin. The higher part, Atik Yomin, is Atik means detached because it's removed from the world. Arachampin is the source of creation. So the source of chesed is in the whiteness of the head of Arachampin, whatever that means. Apparently, both emotions and intellect have sources in Arachampin. Within Arachampin, the source of emotions is higher than the source of intellect. In the Seder Hishtalshlus, in the process of creation, the intellect is higher than the emotions. But when we look at their source in Keser, then the source of emotions is higher than the source of intellect. That's another rule that you can take to the bank that comes up a lot, that something which is lower has a higher source. So our Gabbai says they heard it from a high white horse south.
Does that include evil?
In many ways, yeah.
I mean, isn't that like Esau? It's the same kind of idea.
Esav is
Yeah.
Olam HaTohu.
Yeah.
Right.
And Olam HaTohu is higher than Olam HaTikun.
Yeah, that's that's the same point.
So where we have emotion higher than intellect is pre-creation, right? That's what we're saying.
Before the process of creation.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Alan, 544.
Shining forth from him is the whiteness of the head of Arachampin. Although the emotions are inspired by the intellect, they do not originate in the intellect. The intellect is a detached, cold, objective faculty, and therefore cannot produce an emotion, which is an excited, subjective response. All the intellect provides the emotions is their inspiration. That is the subject matter to which the emotion responds. In fact, the greater the intellectual understanding of a given concept, the greater and more intense the emotional response to it. But although the intellect can stimulate fire and feed the emotions, it cannot produce them, since they are not intellectual by nature. Therefore, the emotions must have their own independent source in the soul apart from the intellect. This source is in the Partsuf of Arachampin, which is higher and precedes both the Partsufim of the intellect, Abba and Ima, and that of the emotions, Zeranpin. And here we see an interesting thing. While in the conscious part of the soul, the intellect is higher and precedes the emotions, in the superconscious will, Arachampin, the situation is reversed. The source of the emotions is higher and precedes that of the intellect. In other words, up there in the superconscious parts of the soul, the emotions are superior to and more real than the intellect. It is only in our conscious lives that the intellect is superior to the emotions, because in the process of becoming conscious, the emotions suffer a fall in that they become tainted by the ego. But up there in our pure selves, our emotions are more the real thing than our intellect. This is reflected in our conscious lives as well, in the fact that the emotions are the true test of a person's personality. It is easy to spout allegiances and philosophies of life on an intellectual level, but the extent to which these have been truly integrated into a person's life becomes evident only when we see how he reacts emotionally to things. In any case, the root of chesed is the superconscious, is the whiteness of arachanpin.
All right, sounds good. We said before that a Kohen is associated with Chesed, the first sphere on the right side of the emotions. The first sphere on the right side of intellect is Chachma, and a Kohen Gadol is associated with Chachma. Regarding a Kohen being with the right side of the Chesed, not important. Okay.
Okay.
Jim, are you ready? 545.
I am. The Sephira of Chachma, as well, is a referent for the high priest. The high priest was distinguished in a number of ways from the rest of the priests, most markedly by 4 extra garments he wore: the breastplate, the ephod, the headband, and the robe. And the fact that only he was allowed inside Holy of Holies, the inner sanctum of the temple, and only once a year on Yom Kippur. His relationship to the rest of the priests was analogous to that between the priests and the laity, in that he wore special garments, he had special privileges, and he had special duties. He was thus the most special of the special, a sort of super priest, who embodied all the aspects of priesthood, but in a more absolute way. Therefore, if a priest in general may be said to be a manifestation of the Sephira of Chesed, the high priest would be a manifestation of the Sephira directly above Chesed on the Sephira tree, and this is Chachma.
Okay, thank you, Alan, for moving it. Number 5, the garments the Kohen Gadol wears on a daily basis are known as Bigdei Zahav, garments of gold, because they had gold strands in the thread. When the Kohen Gadol did the service exclusive to Yom Kippur, he changed into garments with only linen, so as not to wear any reminder of the golden calf when he entered the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies. So on Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol would wear the regular garments, his regular garments, the garments of gold, let's say to do the daily offering, and then he would change to do the special into linen garments to do the special service for Yom Kippur. So he changed a number of times back and forth in Yom Kippur. The Torah says the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur should wear ksones bad, a linen tunic, in a code known as Atbash, which I hope we're all familiar with. In Atbash, the first letter of the alphabet is changed for the last letter. The second letter is changed for the second to last letter, and so on. So A becomes a Z, B becomes a Y. So the word bad, linen, becomes sak. Beis is the second letter, Dalet is the fourth letter. Sin is the second to last letter, and Kuf is the fourth to last letter. And sak means sackcloth. It does refer to a garment. It can refer to a garment. Not a comfortable one. The gematria of sak is 400, which, as we said before, is connected with chesed, the 400 silver shekel Avraham paid for the cave of Machpelah.
Okay.
Continue.
This is why the high priest had to wear linen clothes on Yom Kippur. As it is written, he shall wear a holy linen robe. This is because sackcloth, which is linen, manifest the 400 worlds. The word for linen, bod, transforms into the word for sackcloth, sak, in the system of Atbash. This is the esoteric meaning of the fact the high priest dons linen garments on Yom Kippur. Understand this. The reference to the 400 worlds is explained in greater detail in another text, which we will now quote. The dominant symbolic imagery in this passage is that of hair. Hair is considered to be alive since it's constantly growing, but the life force it possesses is very limited since it can be cut without causing any pain to the person.
7 o'clock.
It therefore signifies the transference of a highly limited and a diluted level of life force from the area of the body from which it issues.
Okay, so on the one hand, it's connected to the head, it grows from the head. On the other hand, it's so removed from the person that it doesn't cause pain when it's cut. Only if it's pulled. Okay, so till here, we quoted from the Shar HaMitzvos and Tamei HaMitzvos. Now we're going to switch to Shar Ruach HaKodesh. Before the Arizal mentioned the whiteness of the head of our Champin, the book now switches to a different work of the Arizal to explain the hair. 7. On the head of our Champin are 13 strands of hair and 13 white or bald spots. For 4 of the hairs and 4 white spots extend downward to the head of Ze'er Anpin. This is from Arech Anpin into Ze'er Anpin, and thus these hairs cover Abba and Ima, the intellect that's either bypassed or someone with long hair that reaches down past their shoulders. Keser, of which Arech Anpin is the lower part, is associated with the will of a person. So going from top to bottom, we have a person's will, then intellect, then the emotions. Continue, Jim.
On the head of our Champin, there are 13 strands of hair and 13 white, that is, bald areas. 4 of the white areas together with 4 strands of hair extend behind and below the head of Erech Anpin and reach down to the head of Ze'er Anpin. These hairs thus cover Abba and Ima. Thus, Erech Anpin, that is the will, produces hairs through which its intense spiritual energy is transmitted in a highly diluted form to the lower levels of creation. They bypass the intellect, Abba and Ima, altogether. The intellect plays no role in the creation of the emotions or Ze'er Anpin.
Okay, 8. As we've seen numerous times, the spelling of Hashem's name Havaya, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, can be expanded by writing the name of each letter. We thus have Yud is Yud Vav Daled, Hey is Hey Yud, Vav is Vav Yud Vav, and Hey is Hey Yud. And when the spelling is expanded this way, the gematria is 72, and there are 4 Yuds. The 4 Yuds manifest the 4 hairs and 4 white spots of our Champin, that descend to the head of Ze'er Anpin. Since each Yud contains 10 sublevels, each Yud equals 100 instead of 10, and 4 Yuds equal 400.
400, back to 400.
Fingers on it, yeah. The gematria of sackcloth, which is a code for bod, the linen garments worn by the Kohen Gadol and Yom Kippur, is 400.
400. Okay, these 4 hairs and 4 white areas are manifestations of the 4 yuds in the milieu of the name Chavaya, whose numerical value is 72. The name Chavaya can be spelled out in 4 different ways, as we mentioned previously in our discussion, Parshas Debruma. When it is spelled out such that the numerical value is 72, 4 yuds are used. This spelling out of the name is associated with the Sephir of Chachma.
Keep going.
The numerical value of each of these four yuds is 10, and they include another 10. This yields 400, which is the numerical value of the word for sackcloth, sock. As we mentioned on a previous occasion, inter-inclusion is the hallmark of holiness.
Okay. I guess it means inter-include means counting the sub-levels within each one.
Yeah.
Now, the threads of the linen garments and the spaces between them correspond to the hairs and white spots of the head of Arich Anpin that we mentioned before. However, he does point out that the hair on the head of Arich Anpin are not black hair, they are white hair, which is where is it? In the book of Daniel. Okay, go ahead, Jim.
Now, the strands, the threads of the sackcloth manifest the hairs themselves of the above mentioned four strands of the hair of Arich Anpin, while the spaces in between the threads of the sackcloth manifest the four white spaces. The latter look like white paper on which is written black letters, that is, dark hairs. In fact, on the head of Arich Anpin, there is white as white snow.
Okay. So, I was babysitting some grandchildren at home, and that's why I didn't get a chance to do the notes. But we'll do it. We'll continue reading. So okay, so right now we're talking about the hair. When klipa, we know, and I should point out, I don't like translating klipa as evil. Klipa is how do you say it? Symbolized, identified with Esav, like we had a number of times. And when Esav was born, it says kulo ka'aderes seyar. His whole body was like a what? A cape of hair? Maybe a cape.
Red and hairy.
Huh?
Red and hairy.
Red
Yeah.
hairy.
Garment of hair.
A garment of hair, but the ader is like a cape or a burqa or something. So it's a garment. So this garment of hair, when Esav was born, that Esav was already born with, is the hair of klipa, the counterpart to the hair of holiness. Okay, go ahead, Jim. Corresponding.
Corresponding to these, in the realm of evil, opposite the world of Bacillus, there are 400 red hairs. These are called the garment of hair of the red-haired Esau. Almost all aspects of the created order have corresponding entities in the realm of evil, as is written, you have made one opposite the other. This is in order to afford man the possibility of free choice. Nevertheless, the choice is weighted in favor of good and holiness, as the ensuing discussion will demonstrate. Whereas Abraham personified the divine attribute of chesed, Isaac personified Gevurah, Esau, the son of Isaac, personified the fallen evil aspect of Gevurah. He is therefore associated with the color red.
Okay. So what he says here is that in Kedusha and holiness, this is all we come across this a lot in Chassidus, that the intellect is supposed to control the emotions. If there's holiness there, then the intellect controls emotions. So the intellect, and this is what we have when we put on tefillin. where we tie by our mind and we tie by our heart on our arm next to our heart, that the mind should choose. Mind knows what's right and what's wrong. The mind chooses what is the right path. But then, not necessarily you're going to follow it. Or you can follow it, but you can follow it kicking and screaming. So you want your emotions to be on board. You want them to support what you're doing. You want to have feeling and passion. Okay, I know I got to daven, so I'm going to go daven. I wish I didn't have to. Okay, what we want is that the emotions should be on board. There should be passion when you do the mitzvah, whatever mitzvah it is. That is holiness. So the mind controls the feeling, but in Klipa, I guess the emotions control the intellect. So I want to control the world. I have so I'm going to figure out a diabolical plan. The intellect can have a plan how to do that. So the emotions are the ones who are in control. Gershon, you ready?
This accords with what I have taught you, that in the evil realm opposite the world of Atzilus, the only evil that has been rectified is that opposite Zer Ampin and its Nukba, which are the archetypes, as I say, of the wicked Esau and his wife. The evil that is opposite Ava and Ima of the world of Atzilus did not undergo the rectification process of becoming a Partsuf, but rather remained simple points, similar to how the primordial kings, that means the Sephiroths of Toku, were before they were rectified. Herein lies the essential superiority of intellect over emotion, whereas the evil emotions, evil love, hatred, etc., can function harmoniously, that means behave as a Partsuf. The evil intellect cannot. On the side of evil, then, intellect is always subservient to emotions. That is, it serves simply as a way to justify and rationalize the emotions and devise plans to satisfy them, rather than as a way to direct or influence them. In contrast, since the holy intellect can behave as the Partsufim, it has the power of its combined elements working together and can therefore influence the emotions. Just what you said.
Okay. I said like the small type, not the bold type. I guess that's how he explains the bold type. So he says that in the side of holiness, we're talking about hairs. What is hairs or hair? It means that the divinity, divine energy, has to be diminished and very, very narrow, minute, in order for the world to be able to tolerate, to be created, and not to be overwhelmed, but to tolerate the divine energy. That's what it says next. Okay, Gershon, now.
Now, you already know that in the holy side of creation, there must be hairs in order to achieve proper rectification. That is, in order to diminish the light such that it can be channeled through tubes of the hairs in a highly filtered way. This is necessary in order that the lower realms be able to bear the light without being nullified and dying, as happened originally. Should I continue?
No.
No.
Okay. So this idea of hair, which means that the divine energy or the infinite light is becoming extremely narrow and channeled, is only in Ze'er Ampin. On the side of Klipa, it's only in Ze'er Ampin, but it's not in the intellect. It's not in Chachma Bina or Abba and Ima. We said before that the hairs at the level of Ze'er Ampin in Klipa is what's called Esav and his wife.
Which one?
Which wife? I was just thinking about that. Usually talk about I think it's the fourth one. The third one. Machalas was the daughter of Esav. Ava Yishmael, I'm sorry. Machal is the daughter of Yishmael. Usually that's who we refer to.
Should I continue?
Yes, now please continue.
The concept of these hairs, which form part of the rectification process, are not to be found in the evil that is opposite Ava and Ima of the world of Atzilus. Only the evil opposite Zerampin and its Nukba, which are the archetypes of Esau and his wife. Hair, as an element of rectification, appears only in the context of the Partsuk.
Okay. Okay. Next he says. Next it says, this is why Esav was born full of hair, and Yaakov did not have hair. Esav was klipa, and therefore the level of hair in klipa is at Zerampin. Yaakov was at the level of at the level of Abba and Ima. Then they're in Kedusha, in holiness, there would be hair. But Yaakov is Zerampin. Yaakov stands for Tiferes. And at that level, in holiness, there's no hair. Wasn't there, Fuzzy Wuzzy, right? Fuzzy Wuzzy had no hair.
The phenomenon, okay, yeah, I see what you mean.
That's a different one.
Oh,
Fuzzy Wuzzy was a bear. Fuzzy Wuzzy had no hair.
oh,
Fuzzy Wuzzy wasn't very fuzzy, was he? Right?
Was he?
I guess they didn't teach you that in Buenos Aires.
before my time.
Before your time.
So ready? The phenomenon of hair, which occurs in the realm of holiness at the level of Ava and Ima, occurs in the realm of evil at the level opposite Zerampin and its Nukba. This is why Esau was born entirely covered with red hair, while Jacob, who was the archetype of Zerampin of holiness, was not hairy. This is because the entirety of Atzilus is completely rectified, and therefore hair is necessary only at the level of Ava and Ima. Even Jacob, that means Zerampin, without hair. The intensity of the light at the level of Zerampin, the emotions, is dim enough that there is no danger of it producing hair. The evil life force that will be channeled into the world as a result of this hair, that means that of Esau, the evil Zerampin, will be enough to sustain the realm of evil, but not enough to empower it to perpetrate its designs on creation. As we said above, the existence of a minimal amount of evil in the world is necessary in order to afford man free choice. Something that Rudy keeps saying all the time.
MP 548. So now we have another connection. We talked about the 400 silver shekel that Avram paid Ephron to buy the cave of Machpelah. But there's another 400. Esav arrived when he heard that Yaakov was coming from Haran up north and coming back to Israel. Esav went to give him a grand welcome with 400 men, 400 soldiers. This is why he had the 400, because he was this idea of klipa, of hair on the side of klipa. Go ahead, Gershon.
No.
This is the mystical meaning of the 400 men who accompanied Esau. They correspond to the 400 levels mentioned above, which in turn are referred as to the 400 silver shekels, which Abraham paid for the Machpelah cave.
Okay.
Now the forces of evil seek to overcome this situation and undergo the rectification process of becoming a partsuf, as well, all the way up to the levels that are opposite Arihampi, Ava and Ima of Atzilus, and thus be able to channel their light through hers the same way as is done in the side of holiness. Referring to this, the scripture states, if you will ascend like an eagle and put your nest among the stars, I will pull you down from there, says Hashem. For if, Hashem forbid, evil would be allowed to undergo this rectification process at the level of Arihampin, Ava, and Ima, the world would be destroyed.
Mhm.
That is, a contraction of the life force of holiness through the channel of hair to the realm of evil would be disastrous at these levels, since the intensity of their light is much greater than that of Zerampi. Transmission of life force this way from them to the realm of evil would grant evil much too much power. Evil much too much power. All right.
Here is that verse from.
Are you
Where's
talking
that
to me?
verse? If you will ascend like an eagle and put your nest amongst the
Oh,
stars.
Obadiah,
Who was Obadiah?
prophet.
And you know anything about him? He was
I thought he was a later prophet. That's all I can remember. Maybe.
he was a convert
Convert. Yeah, later. Mhm.
from Esav,
From the Asa.
Seir. And if I'm not mistaken, that his prophecy ends off with "Va'olu Moshim Ha'artzim Lishvot Es Ha'Esav V'Yisrael Shem Lucha," that the saviors will come up from the Mount Zion to
Mhm.
judge the mountain of Esav.
Judge Asa. Mhm.
And
Oh yeah, right.
Obadiah, he worked, his boss was King Ahab, Achav,
Really? Oh yeah. Wow. Okay.
who is
Not a fine fellow.
what do you call what do they call them? A movie, not the hero, the other guy, antagonist.
Yeah, the
Ahab was the antagonist of Eliyahu Hanavi.
right. And Jezebel.
Yes, and Ahab sought to kill the prophets, and
Mhm.
Obadiah hid 100 prophets,
Mhm.
50 in one cave and 50 in another cave.
Mhm.
And I think that the king of Yehuda came to visit Achav, and he ate because Obadiah was there. And Obadiah kind of gave a hechsher on the food, otherwise he wouldn't have eaten. Made sure that everything was done right.
Mhm.
And so Obadiah, he fed these 100 prophets that he hid at his own expense. And he went into debt, and then he died, and then his widow came to Elisha and said that the creditor wants to take away my 2 children for the debts that my husband incurred. And he told her to get all the containers and pour the oil and so on.
Right.
So this is Obadiah. So interesting that Obadiah is from
Esau.
Esav, and here it
Mhm.
comes from Esav. Okay, so next, Abigail, middle of 548, we're going to say that we talked about sackcloth. Usually, when it talks about sackcloth, it's ve'amash sak va'efer, that the people wore sackcloth out of mourning. So it's a rough material.
Mhm.
They would put it around their hips, I guess, and it wasn't very comfortable. And it also had like hairs, not comfortable hairs, but stiff hairs.
Mhm.
And here it's going to say what the purpose is. Go ahead now.
Now, when a person puts sackcloth on his loins, he weakens the power of those 400 hairs whose numerical value is that of the word for sackcloth. This is so also because these hairs are similar to sackcloth, which is made out of strands of hair-like material. He causes these supernal hairs to be whitened like white snow, and then the 400 white hairs between them, called the 400 silver shekels, together with the energy in the empty spaces between the strands of the sackcloth, will shine forth through the spaces in the sackcloth.
I hope it's visible only one way. Okay, and then we continue. Come back to the white and silver and chesed. Go ahead.
The sackcloth will then become white like silver and become like the holy linen tunic worn by the high priest on Yom Kippur. For the word for linen, bod, transforms into the word for sackcloth, sak, in the system of Atbash. Thus ends our citation from elsewhere in the writings of the Arizal. We now return to the original text we began with.
Okay, but back to the beginning. The Torah says the linen garments are worn at 2 times. One was the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, doing the Yom Kippur the service, which is exclusive to Yom Kippur, and also an ordinary Kohen who cleans the ashes off
Mhm.
the altar in the Beis Hamikdash. Torah says he wears a linen garment. This is in the daily davening, guys. This is every morning in the davening. Okay, go ahead, Abigail. 549.
Now, when an ordinary priest performed the duty of lifting up the ashes of the altar, he also had to wear a linen garment. The truth is that the priestly garments, other than those of the high priest, were all of linen, and all the priests wore these linen garments whenever they performed any of the rites in the temple. However, it's interesting to note that the fact that they were made of linen is not specifically mentioned when the commandment to prepare these garments is given in Shmos 28, but it is mentioned here with regard to the commandment of lifting up the ashes. This would seem to indicate that the fact that the priestly garments were made of linen is somehow intrinsically connected to this mitzvah.
Okay, what? No, this is closed. Brad, you stand out in front and like the Liberty Tax guy. So now, what are they cleaning off on the Mizbeach? You got the stuff burns and it goes on high. Why? What happens to the ash? It's left below. Why? That's the stuff that doesn't ascend and needs to be removed. Go ahead.
The ashes are produced by the residual holiness of the altar, and its assimilable elements, such as that which is left only ash. That which is left is only ash, similar to dust. The fact that in the process of burning the sacrifice, there is a part of the animal that cannot ascend on high, i.e. the ash, indicates that this element of the animal cannot be assimilated into holiness.
Is inassimilable accepted and recognized by Scrabble?
I have trouble with it, but
We'll ask Point.
Yeah.
Okay. So now he removes the ash and he has to wear it. The Torah specifies he wears a linen garment because they are going to what we said on 548 near the bottom. This is going to help elevate. Okay, go ahead, Abigail.
When he removed this element, the priest had to wear linen garments in order to accomplish that which was described above in reference to the sackcloth. In other words, removing the residue of the sacrifice that could not be assimilated into divinity is analogous to neutralizing the 400 evil hairs of Esau, which provide sustenance to the forces of evil. In Hasidus, the Kabbalistic dynamic just described is translated into psychological terms reflected and relevant to daily life as follows. The sacrificial sacrifice is paralleled by the process of prayer. In both cases, the animal elements of man are elevated and refined by the fiery passions of the heart, aroused by singing God's praises and contemplating his infinity. However, also in both cases, there is an element of residual animal life force that cannot be elevated. In man, this ash is the depression he feels over his own animal nature after having experienced the transcendence of divine reality in prayer. Feeling the closeness of God and the ecstasy of ascent should grant a person enough frustration with his material nature to inspire him to work on it, but not throw him into depression over it. Depression, though not an explicit sin, is the gateway to all other sins, since it engenders despair and hopelessness. How tragic it would be for the holy experience of prayer and divine closeness to leave a person with a dejected feeling of his own worthlessness that would in turn make him give up. Thus, before he even begins to pray, he should separate himself from this negativity this leftover ash that will result in from his ardent, fiery service of God. Therefore, we read this passage of the Torah, Bible, before morning prayers, in order that it be as if we performed this rite in the temple,
Mhm.
thus protected with God's help from any negative side effects of ecstatic meditation and prayer.
Hmm.
Interesting.
Okay,
Very good.
this is about the ashes, this is about the linen garment, this is about Esav and the hair,
Mhm.
not the tortoise, the hair. Just
Very
Esav.
good.